It was a morning like any other in the quiet corridors of Buckingham Palace, but the tension that gripped the walls was palpable, heavier than any visitor had ever witnessed. Outside, the sun rose gently over the manicured gardens. Birds chirped without awareness of the storm brewing within the monarchy. And yet, inside those grand halls, whispers carried more weight than the echo of footsteps on polished marble. A decision had been made, one that would shake the foundations of the British royal family and reverberate across the globe. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, beloved by some, controversial to others, was about to face a reality he never imagined: the stripping of his royal title, the loss of his identity as a prince, and a sudden descent into the life of a private citizen. The air was thick with anticipation and unease. In a room deep within the palace, King Charles, a man whose every move had been scrutinized for decades, prepared himself to deliver news that was both personal and public, political and deeply emotional. Beside him stood Prince William, the future king, carrying a burden of his own, one of duty, loyalty, and the weight of centuries of tradition. Their announcement would not only redefine Harry's place in the family, but also ignite a global debate, fueling media frenzy, fan speculation, and a torrent of social commentary that would not relent for weeks, perhaps months. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Harry himself, though aware that tensions were rising, could not have anticipated the swiftness or the finality of what was about to occur. For years, his life had been a delicate balancing act, navigating public duties, private grief, personal ambitions, and the glaring spotlight of an entire world watching his every move. He had faced the tragic loss of his mother, Princess Diana, endured relentless tabloid scrutiny, and walked the fine line between loyalty to his family and the desire for personal freedom. Yet nothing in those years of preparation, counseling, and private reflection could have truly prepared him for a morning when his title, a part of his very identity since birth, would be stripped away with a declaration that would make history. The stakes were higher than most people could comprehend. Royal titles are not merely ceremonial. They are woven into the fabric of centuries-old institutions, codes of conduct, and legal traditions. They carry prestige, expectation, and responsibility. To remove a title from a member of the family is to challenge not only the individual, but the public's perception of the monarchy itself. It is a calculated act that sends a message, one intended to assert authority, maintain order, and signal the boundaries of behavior within the royal institution. For Harry, the announcement would be more than symbolic. It would be deeply personal. It would signal a fracture, a public acknowledgement of discord, and a separation from the roles and responsibilities he had once embraced. The world outside was oblivious at first. Journalists, eager and hungry for headlines, waited for any hint of scandal, while the general public carried on with their daily routines, unaware that a momentous decision was unfolding behind the palace gates. Social media, though not yet ablaze, would soon become a powerful amplifier, spreading the news at lightning speed, dissecting every word, every gesture, every possible implication of what was to come. Every detail of the announcement would be analyzed, debated, and judged, and every reaction would contribute to a narrative that might never fully align with the truth of Harry's personal experience. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, charged with a mixture of formality and fear, respect and trepidation. Courtiers, aides, and advisors moved with careful precision, aware that their actions could influence not only the immediate outcome but also the historical record. In a world where appearances matter as much as decisions, every gesture, every pause, every nod carried significance. King Charles, who had spent decades cultivating his own public image and managing the delicate balance of family and monarchy, understood that this moment would define not just his reign, but his legacy. Prince William, whose loyalty to his brother was tested against his loyalty to his father and the institution, faced a different kind of pressure. One that demanded both empathy and pragmatism, affection and duty. Meanwhile, Harry, unaware of the exact timing of the announcement, was somewhere between reflection and apprehension. He had been prepared, in theory, for challenges, criticisms, and perhaps even public humiliation. But this official stripping of his title was different. It was not a scandal leaked by tabloids or a private disagreement made public. It was a deliberate, irrevocable decision by the very people who had the power to define his identity from birth. The emotional weight of it pressed down like an invisible hand, constricting his chest, making every breath a reminder of what was at stake. And then, as the world waited with bated breath, the announcement came. Not through a carefully staged press release or a strategic statement, but through the inevitable mechanisms of protocol and procedure. The declaration was formal, precise, and unyielding. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, would no longer be recognized as a prince. He would no longer hold a title that had connected him to the monarchy, to centuries of tradition, and to a public persona he had inhabited since birth. He was to be reduced to a private citizen, stripped of his ceremonial identity, and forced to confront a life outside the sphere that had defined him. The ramifications were immediate and far-reaching. Within hours, news outlets around the world had picked up the story, each framing it through their own lens of interpretation. Commentators debated the morality of the decision, the implications for the royal family, and the precedent it might set for other members of the monarchy. Social media erupted with outrage, support, skepticism, and speculation. The public, who had long been fascinated by Harry's life, now had a new chapter to dissect, one that would fuel conversations at dinner tables, in office spaces, and across digital forums. But beyond the headlines and public discourse, the personal impact was profound. Harry faced the loss not as a theoretical concept, but as a lived reality. His role, his identity, and his sense of belonging were all called into question. He was forced to reckon with the fact that the privileges and responsibilities he had known since childhood could be taken away by a single act of authority. The emotional complexity of this moment was staggering. Grief mingled with anger, betrayal intertwined with resignation, and the need for personal dignity collided with the public spectacle of royal protocol. No one could predict exactly how Harry would respond. Would he retreat into private life, seeking solace and distance from the scrutiny that had defined so much of his existence? Would he speak out, using his voice and platform to challenge the decision and defend his position? Or would he attempt to navigate a delicate middle path, balancing personal vindication with public restraint, and trying to preserve relationships that had suddenly been strained beyond recognition? Every option carried risk, every choice had consequences, and every reaction would be scrutinized by millions of people worldwide. In the midst of this turmoil, other actors in the drama also faced their own challenges. Meghan Markle, Harry's wife, was confronted with a parallel crisis: how to support her husband, protect her family, and maintain her own public image, all while under intense media scrutiny. Courtiers and palace staff had to navigate the intricate web of protocol, public perception, and personal loyalty. And King Charles and Prince William, while executing a decision they believed necessary, also had to contend with the personal ramifications of distancing a family member, knowing that history would judge not just the act itself, but the manner in which it was carried out. The mourning passed, and yet the reverberations of the decision continued to unfold. Media crews camped outside the palace, eager for any statement, any sign of movement, any hint of emotion from Harry, William, or Charles. Social media analysts tracked engagement metrics, dissected hashtags, and predicted public sentiment. Royal watchers, commentators, and experts weighed in with historical context, psychological analysis, and political implications. And through it all, Harry's personal experience remained central, an intimate story of identity, loss, and transformation amidst a backdrop of public spectacle. This is the story of that day and the days that followed. It is a tale of power, duty, family, and personal struggle. It is a story of a prince who suddenly found himself without a title, a man forced to reconcile who he is with who the world now perceives him to be. It is a narrative of heartbreak and resilience, of public scrutiny and private anguish, of tradition clashing with personal freedom. And as we unravel the layers of this event, we will explore not just the facts, but the emotions, the decisions, and the consequences that ripple far beyond the palace walls. The world watched, waiting for a reaction, a statement, a sign of defiance or acceptance. But Harry's story is not just about the title he lost. It is about the identity he must now reclaim, the family dynamics he must navigate, and the legacy he must consider in a life forever changed by one irrevocable decision. And as this story unfolds, it raises a question that resonates far beyond royalty. What happens when the very essence of who you are is suddenly called into question, and the world watches as you struggle to redefine yourself? It all began with a meeting that would forever change the trajectory of the British monarchy. The palace corridors, usually filled with the subtle rhythm of tradition and quiet protocol, now hummed with an urgency that seemed almost alive. Courtiers whispered in corners, aides scurried to deliver last-minute reports, and security personnel moved with calculated precision, their expressions taut, betraying the weight of the day. The decision had been made. King Charles and Prince William were about to make public what had long been speculated behind closed doors. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, was to be stripped of his royal title. Inside a stately room lined with centuries-old portraits, King Charles, dressed in his formal robes of state, sat with a demeanor that balanced authority and resolve. Every fold of his posture, every deliberate movement, signaled the gravity of the moment. He knew that this was not just a decision about a family member. It was a public statement, a reinforcement of tradition, and a signal to the world that the monarchy remained steadfast in maintaining its codes of conduct. The king had spent countless nights weighing the consequences of this decision, consulting advisors, legal experts, and close confidants. Yet, even with all the preparation, the enormity of what he was about to do pressed heavily upon him. Prince William, seated beside his father, bore a different burden. Unlike Charles, whose authority was absolute, William had a more nuanced position, caught between loyalty to his brother and duty to his father. His gaze was steady but introspective, as though he were examining not just the implications for the monarchy, but the personal cost of the decision. The brothers' relationship, once characterized by shared childhood adventures and mutual support, had been strained over time, tested by public scrutiny, personal differences, and the pressures of royal life. William understood that this announcement could irreparably alter their bond, yet he also recognized that, in his role as the future king, certain measures were inevitable. Outside the room, the world had no idea what was unfolding. Journalists were already gathering near Buckingham Palace, sensing the undercurrent of tension that had rippled through the royal community in recent weeks. Rumors had circulated, stories of disagreements, internal strife, and potential disciplinary measures, but no one could have anticipated the magnitude of the decision about to be revealed. Social media feeds were quiet, awaiting the first sign, the first official word that would ignite a global conversation. Then, the announcement began. In a formal press release drafted with precision, King Charles declared that Prince Harry would no longer be recognized as a prince and that he would be reduced to the status of a private citizen. The wording was deliberate, chosen to convey authority while maintaining the dignity of the monarchy. Legal language intertwined with ceremonial phrasing, leaving no ambiguity. Harry's royal privileges, his public role, and his official title were revoked, effective immediately. The statement sent shockwaves through the palace and beyond. Courtiers exchanged glances, some subdued with resignation, others tinged with disbelief. The media, which had long speculated about the possibility of royal repercussions, now had confirmation, and the world reacted almost instantaneously. Headlines flashed across screens, news channels interrupted programming, and social media platforms erupted with commentary. Prince Harry stripped of title, Duke of Sussex no more, and monarchy sends a message were among the first banners to appear, each capturing the gravity of the moment. For Harry, the announcement was devastating. Though he had anticipated tension and criticism, the finality of losing his title brought a different level of emotional reality. It was one thing to face tabloid scrutiny or public disapproval, but entirely another to have the very identity he had been given at birth officially taken away. His role in the family, his perceived responsibilities, and even his sense of self were suddenly in question. The title of prince was not merely ceremonial. It was a marker of status, a symbol of heritage, and a lens through which the world viewed him. Losing it meant more than losing privileges. It meant losing a piece of who he had always been. As the world consumed the news, reactions were immediate and divided. Royal watchers and experts offered varying interpretations. Some viewed the decision as a necessary measure to uphold the integrity of the monarchy, a demonstration that titles and honors come with expectations that must be respected. Others criticized the move as harsh and personal, questioning whether such an action could damage family bonds beyond repair. Psychologists weighed in, noting the potential emotional and psychological impact on Harry, particularly given the history of grief and pressure he had endured since childhood. Meanwhile, Harry's personal circle, friends, advisors, and Meghan Markle grappled with their own reactions. Meghan, known for her composure in public, was privately devastated. The news was more than a headline. It was a statement of judgment against her husband, and by extension, against the family she had become part of. Friends reported that she felt a mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief, struggling to reconcile the public spectacle with the private reality of her husband's pain. The couple's children, though young, would inevitably be affected by the shift in public perception, prompting urgent conversations about how to navigate the changing landscape of their family identity. Public response was equally intense. Across the United Kingdom and around the world, social media users debated the fairness of the decision. Some expressed unwavering support for the King and Prince William, citing the need to maintain tradition and accountability within the monarchy. Others voiced sympathy for Harry, criticizing the public stripping of his title as excessively punitive and emotionally damaging. News commentators dissected every aspect of the announcement, speculating on potential future consequences for the royal family, for Harry personally, and for the perception of the monarchy as an institution. Behind the scenes, legal and procedural steps were already underway to formalize the decision. Advisors worked diligently to ensure that the revocation of Harry's title complied with both royal protocol and British law. Documents were drafted, approvals obtained, and official records updated, all while maintaining discretion to prevent leaks. The meticulous nature of these actions underscored the gravity of the situation. This was not a symbolic gesture. It was a legally and ceremonially binding act that would permanently redefine Harry's place within the monarchy. Yet, even as procedures unfolded, the human element remained central. Stripping a title is not merely a bureaucratic act. It is a deeply personal event, charged with emotion, history, and consequence. For Harry, it was a moment of reckoning, forcing him to confront not only the external realities of public judgment, but also the internal realities of identity, belonging, and self-perception. It was a moment that would challenge his resilience, his sense of purpose, and his connection to a family that had always defined him in ways both subtle and profound. Analysts speculated on Harry's next moves. Would he retreat entirely from the public eye, seeking refuge in private life away from scrutiny? Would he confront the monarchy publicly, using media appearances or interviews to assert his perspective? Or would he attempt to navigate a careful path, balancing personal dignity with the potential to preserve familial relationships? Each option carried immense risk, and the implications extended far beyond Harry himself, touching on the broader perception of the monarchy and the precedents set for other members of the royal family. For King Charles and Prince William, the announcement represented both a challenge and an assertion of authority. They were fully aware of the scrutiny they would face, the critiques they would endure, and the potential backlash from both the public and media outlets. Yet the decision also allowed them to reinforce the message that royal titles are not merely inherited privileges, but responsibilities that must be respected. It was an act that combined familial judgment with institutional preservation, signaling that the monarchy was prepared to enforce standards, even when doing so involved personal relationships and public spectacle. As the initial shockwaves subsided, attention turned to the unfolding consequences. How would this affect Harry's philanthropic work, his engagements, and his public image? How would media coverage evolve, and what narratives would dominate the conversation? What would the impact be on his personal life, his family, and his relationship with his brother and father? Each question opened new avenues for speculation and analysis, deepening the intrigue and heightening the emotional intensity surrounding the announcement. In retrospect, the morning of the announcement would be remembered as a pivotal moment in modern royal history. It was a day when tradition collided with personal narrative, when public duty intersected with private emotion, and when one man's identity was irrevocably altered in the glare of global attention. For Prince Harry, the consequences would unfold over months and years, shaping his actions, his decisions, and his relationships in ways that could not yet be fully anticipated. For the monarchy, it was a test of resilience, authority, and the delicate balance between familial bonds and institutional integrity. The story of that day is not just a tale of a title lost. It is a narrative of human emotion, historical consequence, and the interplay between public expectation and private reality. It is a story that reveals the pressures, complexities, and sacrifices inherent in life at the highest levels of monarchy, where every decision carries weight, every word is scrutinized, and every action has the potential to redefine the course of history. The announcement had barely settled when the first ripples of fallout began to spread. Buckingham Palace, usually a symbol of stoicism and tradition, was now awash in an almost tangible tension. Staff members whispered in hallways, some with awe, some with apprehension, as they tried to process the implications of what had just occurred. Courtiers who had served the royal family for decades found themselves reflecting on how unprecedented this move truly was. Never before had a prince of the blood been stripped of his title so publicly. The historical weight of the decision reverberated like a silent thunderclap throughout the palace and across the country. Inside the family, emotions were running high. Prince Harry, miles away from the corridors of power and the media frenzy, felt the full force of what had been done. He had expected tension, perhaps even confrontation, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of being reduced to a private citizen in the eyes of the monarchy. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, the weight of the title he had lost pressing down on him like a physical burden. Prince, a word that had defined him since birth, had been officially erased from his identity. It was more than a title. It was a mark of privilege, responsibility, and belonging, all now stripped away. Meghan Markle, aware of the emotional toll on her husband, was equally shaken. She had endured scrutiny, criticism, and public vitriol for years, but this struck at the very foundation of the family they had tried to build together. Sources close to her reported that she oscillated between anger, disbelief, and a profound sense of injustice. Friends described her as both protective and fiercely determined, vowing to stand by Harry no matter how the public narrative evolved. Yet, even with that resolve, the news left an indelible mark on her psyche, highlighting just how precarious life could be when intertwined with the machinery of royalty. As the family grappled with the personal implications, the media frenzy intensified. News outlets around the globe scrambled to report the story, often with conflicting narratives and sensationalized details. Headlines screamed of scandal, betrayal, and unprecedented measures. Prince Harry no more, monarchy sends stern warning, and royal rift exposed were among the first banners to dominate online platforms and television screens. Social media erupted, with users divided between supporters of the monarchy and sympathizers of Harry's plight. Some saw the move as a necessary assertion of discipline and order, while others condemned it as harsh, vindictive, and emotionally damaging. Royal experts weighed in almost immediately. Biographers, historians, and political commentators dissected every facet of the announcement, analyzing the language of the press release, the timing of the decision, and the potential ramifications for the monarchy's public image. Some emphasized the importance of maintaining traditional protocols, noting that titles are not merely ceremonial, but carry with them an expectation of loyalty, conduct, and public service. Others questioned the human cost, highlighting Harry's previous struggles with grief, mental health, and the relentless pressure of public scrutiny. The public reaction was equally complex. Supporters of Harry flooded social media with expressions of sympathy, highlighting the emotional and psychological impact of such a dramatic change in status. Hashtags began trending almost immediately, with phrases like hashtag support Prince Harry, hashtag royal justice, and hashtag Harry deserves better appearing across platforms. Others defended the monarchy, emphasizing that titles and privileges come with expectations that must be respected, regardless of personal circumstances. This polarization created a volatile environment, with debate often spilling into heated arguments online, reflecting the deep division in public sentiment. The timing of the announcement also played a crucial role in shaping public perception. Coming at a moment when the monarchy was already navigating multiple controversies and internal challenges, the decision to strip Harry of his title was seen by some as both bold and risky. The palace had to consider not only the immediate family dynamics, but also the broader implications for public trust, international perception, and the future of the institution itself. Advisors worked tirelessly to anticipate the questions that journalists would pose, preparing responses that balanced authority with diplomacy, clarity with discretion. Behind closed doors, the royal family faced internal tensions. While King Charles and Prince William had made the decision with a sense of duty and institutional responsibility, not every family member was in agreement. Some expressed concern about the emotional impact on Harry and the potential long-term consequences for familial relationships. Others supported the move, viewing it as a necessary step to reinforce the standards and expectations of royal life. These private debates, often conducted in hushed tones within the palace, underscored the delicate balance between personal loyalty and public duty that the monarchy continually navigates. Harry's immediate response was a mixture of anger, disappointment, and profound hurt. Close friends and advisors described him as withdrawn, spending hours reflecting on the events and the symbolism of what had been done. Losing the title was not merely a symbolic blow. It was an official severing of the link between him and the institution he had been born into. He began contemplating his next steps, weighing the possibility of a public statement, media engagement, or retreat from public life. Each option carried potential benefits and risks, and every decision would inevitably be scrutinized, dissected, and debated in the global arena. Meghan, meanwhile, focused on supporting Harry while managing the public fallout. Her media team prepared statements to address rumors and speculation, emphasizing the couple's commitment to each other and their desire to maintain family unity despite the public nature of the events. Friends reported that Meghan was particularly concerned about the impact on their children, fearing that the narrative surrounding Harry's title would affect their sense of security, identity, and public perception. She was determined to shield them from the storm as much as possible, while also navigating her own emotions and the expectations placed upon her as a member of the royal family. The global media continued to amplify the story. International outlets, from Europe to the United States, provided continuous coverage, often framing the situation as both a personal family drama and a symbolic moment for the British monarchy. Commentary ranged from legal and constitutional analysis to psychological perspectives, highlighting the multifaceted implications of stripping a prince of his title. Some journalists speculated about potential legal challenges, while others focused on the human drama, interviewing royal insiders and biographers to understand the deeper emotional and familial impact. Public opinion polls conducted in the days following the announcement revealed a fascinating divide. While some citizens supported the decision, viewing it as a necessary assertion of order and tradition, others expressed concern about the perceived harshness of the move. Analysts noted that public sentiment was particularly influenced by previous coverage of Harry's struggles with mental health, the pressures he had faced growing up, and the public perception of Meghan as both a supportive partner and a controversial figure. The interplay between sympathy, outrage, and fascination created a complex emotional landscape that the monarchy had to navigate carefully. As the fallout continued, the palace focused on damage control. Advisors prepared talking points, planned strategic appearances, and coordinated responses to media inquiries. Legal teams reviewed the implications of the announcement, ensuring compliance with precedent and protocol. At the same time, efforts were made to manage public perception, emphasizing the necessity of the decision while downplaying personal conflict. The balance between transparency and discretion was delicate, requiring careful communication to avoid inflaming public sentiment or escalating family tensions. The first week after the announcement was particularly intense. Every public appearance, every statement, and every news report became a potential flashpoint for debate and speculation. Harry and Meghan faced heightened scrutiny, while the royal family worked to project stability, authority, and continuity. Social media discussions oscillated between outrage, support, and intrigue, creating a dynamic and often unpredictable environment. The story had become not just about a title, but about identity, loyalty, family dynamics, and the evolving role of the monarchy in a modern world. Historians noted that while the revocation of a royal title was rare, it was not entirely without precedent. Previous generations had faced similar challenges, though usually in more private or discreet circumstances. The difference, in Harry's case, was the unprecedented combination of media scrutiny, global attention, and the intricate interplay of personal, familial, and institutional considerations. The situation highlighted the tension between tradition and modernity, authority and emotion, public duty and private life. In private conversations, advisors speculated about Harry's potential future strategies. Would he seek legal recourse, appeal to public opinion, or step away entirely from royal obligations? Each path carried risks, including further media exposure, potential familial estrangement, and long-term reputational consequences. The choices made in the immediate aftermath would set the tone for years to come, influencing both Harry's personal trajectory and the broader perception of the monarchy. Even as the initial shock subsided, the emotional resonance of the announcement lingered. Family relationships had been tested, public perception had shifted, and the narrative surrounding Prince Harry had entered a new, uncharted chapter. The reverberations were felt not only within the royal household but across the globe, as millions watched, debated, and speculated about the consequences of a decision that was as historic as it was emotionally charged. The story was far from over. While the announcement had marked a clear and definitive action, the true impact on Harry, on Meghan, on the children, and on the monarchy itself would unfold over months and years. The initial fallout had only scratched the surface of a complex and emotionally laden saga, one that combined family, tradition, duty, and the harsh glare of global scrutiny. The stage was set for a period of profound reflection, strategic maneuvering, and emotional reckoning, as all involved tried to navigate the new reality that had been thrust upon them. From the moment the news broke, the world's media outlets mobilized like never before. The announcement that Prince Harry had been stripped of his royal title was not just a story. It was a seismic event that commanded attention across continents. In London, journalists scrambled to be the first to capture reactions from the palace, the streets, and royal insiders. Cameras rolled on the steps of Buckingham Palace, microphones poised as reporters repeated the official statement word for word, analyzing the language and tone for subtle hints of tension or discord. The world was watching, and every angle, every nuance, was dissected with painstaking detail. In New York, Paris, Sydney, and Tokyo, newsrooms shifted their programming to cover the breaking royal saga. Television anchors delivered the story with a mix of gravitas and intrigue, emphasizing the unprecedented nature of the decision. Headlines flashed across screens. Royal shock. Prince Harry loses title. Charles and William make history with bold move. From prince to private citizen. Harry's new reality. Newspapers printed special editions, dedicating entire sections to analysis, speculation, and interviews with experts. Social media erupted simultaneously, with millions of posts, shares, and trending hashtags amplifying the story at lightning speed. Twitter became a battlefield of opinions and emotions. Supporters of Harry flooded the platform with messages of sympathy, highlighting his past struggles with grief, mental health, and the pressures of royal life. Users expressed disbelief that the monarchy would take such a drastic step against someone who had served the institution loyally in his own way. Hashtags like #SupportPrinceHarry, #HarryDeservesBetter, and #RoyalFamilyDrama trended worldwide, driving conversations that ranged from heartfelt solidarity to fierce debates over the ethics of royal governance. At the same time, royalists defended the decision, emphasizing that titles come with responsibilities and expectations. Many argued that Harry's actions in recent years, particularly his public criticisms of the monarchy and involvement in high-profile media projects, made this outcome inevitable. Hashtags such as #RoyalOrder, #RespectTradition, and #DutyFirst began trending alongside discussions about constitutional protocol and the importance of upholding royal norms. The polarized opinions highlighted a deep divide not just in public sentiment, but in the interpretation of duty, loyalty, and individual rights within the framework of a centuries-old institution. News outlets worked overtime to provide context, tracing Harry's trajectory from a beloved prince to a figure increasingly at odds with royal expectations. Biographers revisited his childhood, detailing the pressures of growing up in the public eye, the loss of Princess Diana, and the early signs of his struggles with mental health. Analysts examined his career, charitable work, and the choices that led him to step back from royal duties. By connecting these dots, journalists attempted to explain not just the decision itself, but why it was both shocking and, in the eyes of some, unavoidable. Social media influencers and commentators quickly amplified the story to millions of followers. Instagram posts showed side-by-side images of Harry at official events and moments of personal struggle, often accompanied by captions that underscored the emotional stakes. TikTok videos created dramatic reenactments and speculative narratives, mixing humor, shock, and heartfelt commentary. YouTube channels dedicated hours-long analysis, breaking down the official statements, exploring historical precedents, and predicting possible outcomes. The sheer volume of content created a feedback loop, with each new development sparking further debate and engagement, ensuring the story dominated public consciousness for days on end. Meanwhile, tabloids took the story to new heights of sensationalism. Pages were filled with dramatic language, bold images, and speculative narratives. Headlines suggested scandal, betrayal, and family rifts. Harry stripped bare. Royal family cuts ties. William and Charles assert authority. The fall of a prince. While some of this coverage lacked rigorous sourcing, the emotional weight of the headlines captured the public's imagination, turning the story into both news and spectacle. Readers and viewers alike were drawn into a narrative that blended history, drama, and human emotion, making it impossible to ignore. International media offered additional layers of interpretation. European outlets framed the decision within the context of monarchy versus modernity, exploring how traditional institutions navigate contemporary pressures. American media highlighted the personal drama, emphasizing Harry and Meghan's previous conflicts with the royal establishment. In Asia, coverage focused on the historical significance of stripping a royal title, drawing comparisons to previous controversies in other monarchies. The global perspective underscored the universality of interest in the British royal family and the unique fascination with a story that combined privilege, power, and human vulnerability. Public reactions in the United Kingdom were equally intense. Street interviews captured a spectrum of opinions, from shocked disbelief to supportive understanding. Citizens reflected on Harry's upbringing, his contributions to charitable causes, and the ways he had challenged royal traditions. Some expressed sympathy, emphasizing that the pressures placed on him were extraordinary and that the decision felt excessively harsh. Others viewed the move as a necessary reaffirmation of protocol, emphasizing the importance of upholding standards for all members of the royal family. These voices painted a complex picture of a nation grappling with both emotional and institutional consequences. The media also explored the psychological impact of the decision on Harry and Meghan. Psychologists and behavioral experts offered insights into the effects of public scrutiny, the loss of status, and familial estrangement. Discussions range from the stress of high-profile identity shifts to the potential for long-term emotional consequences. Interviews with mental health professionals emphasized the importance of support systems, resilience, and coping strategies, adding depth to the conversation and highlighting the human dimension behind the headlines. Celebrities and public figures quickly weighed in, amplifying the conversation further. Some offered public support, citing personal experiences with public scrutiny and the pressures of high-profile life. Others defended the monarchy, stressing tradition, duty, and the expectations that come with privilege. Social media platforms buzzed with commentary, reactions, and debates, creating a layered ecosystem of opinion that intertwined personal perspective, historical context, and emotional response. Even within the royal family, aides and advisors monitored media reactions closely. Every article, tweet, and broadcast was analyzed for potential impact, with communication strategies adjusted in real time. The palace sought to maintain control over the narrative, balancing transparency with discretion. Spokespersons provided measured responses, while internal teams ensured that misinformation or misinterpretation was addressed promptly. The goal was to preserve institutional credibility while navigating the volatile and highly publicized fallout. The announcement also sparked discussions about historical precedent. Experts revisited past instances where royal titles had been altered, revoked, or renounced, comparing those circumstances to Harry's situation. While parallels were drawn, analysts emphasized the unprecedented combination of public scrutiny, personal autonomy, and media attention in Harry's case. This historical lens provided a richer understanding of the gravity of the decision, framing it not just as a personal or family issue, but as a defining moment in the evolution of the monarchy itself. Meanwhile, public engagement on social media revealed intriguing patterns. Memes, reaction videos, and satirical commentary proliferated, blending humor with critique. The virality of these posts illustrated how modern audiences process serious news through a mix of entertainment, reflection, and digital participation. The conversation was not confined to traditional media. It had expanded into a living, evolving dialogue shaped by millions of individual voices, each contributing to the ongoing narrative. In parallel, international political analysts considered the broader implications. Questions arose about the perception of the British monarchy abroad, the impact on diplomatic relationships, and the potential precedent set for other royal families worldwide. While the decision was domestic in nature, the global fascination with Harry and Meghan amplified its significance, transforming a familial and institutional matter into a story of international consequence. By the end of the first week, it was clear that the media frenzy was not subsiding. The story had permeated every channel of communication, from traditional newspapers to streaming platforms, from social media to late-night talk shows. Analysts, journalists, and public figures continued to dissect every angle, while the public remained captivated, emotionally invested, and deeply engaged. The narrative had evolved into a multifaceted saga, combining historical precedent, family dynamics, public debate, and personal tragedy, all unfolding in real time for a global audience. In this climate, Harry and Meghan faced the dual challenge of managing their private lives while navigating an unprecedented level of public scrutiny. Every action, every statement, and every decision would be interpreted through the lens of the recent announcement. Advisors emphasized the need for strategic communication, thoughtful engagement with the media, and careful attention to public sentiment. The couple's responses, whether through public statements or private measures, would have lasting implications for both their personal narrative and the reputation of the monarchy. As the media frenzy continued, the question remained, how would Harry adapt to his new reality? Could he maintain a sense of identity, purpose, and dignity after losing a title that had defined him for decades? How would the monarchy balance the tension between tradition and compassion, authority and family loyalty? These questions were not just theoretical. They were immediate, pressing, and emotionally charged. The global media had transformed a personal and familial decision into an epic story of intrigue, conflict, and consequence. Every headline, tweet, and broadcast contributed to the unfolding narrative, ensuring that Harry's title revocation would be remembered not merely as a procedural event, but as a cultural moment, a historic decision, and a deeply human drama. The world was watching, and the story had only just begun. The moment Harry learned that his royal title had been stripped from him, an overwhelming mix of emotions surged through him. Shock was the first reaction, an almost numbing disbelief that a decision so monumental could be delivered with such clinical precision. His mind raced, grappling with the reality of what had just transpired. For decades, the title had been more than a name. It was a symbol of identity, responsibility, and legacy. To lose it was to feel as though a piece of his very self had been excised, leaving a gaping void that no explanation could fill. Meghan, witnessing Harry's pain, struggled to maintain her composure. The news was a personal blow not only to her husband, but to her family unit, which had been carefully constructed over years of effort, sacrifice, and strategy. The couple had envisioned a life together in which they could navigate public scrutiny while maintaining a sense of dignity and autonomy. Now, that vision was shattered. Every plan, every aspiration seemed suddenly fragile, vulnerable to forces beyond their control. The strain extended beyond the couple, reaching deep into the royal family itself. Private conversations, once cordial and strategic, were now fraught with tension. Advisors and family members struggled to reconcile the need for institutional authority with the personal anguish that the decision had caused. The palace, while prepared for media fallout, could not shield the internal emotional turbulence that accompanied such a dramatic move. Every glance, every phone call, and every meeting carried a weight that was almost unbearable. Harry's closest confidants described his emotional state as a mixture of grief and anger. Memories of his mother, Princess Diana, whose life had been marked by both public adoration and personal pain, resurfaced in vivid detail. The parallels were impossible to ignore. The sense of injustice he felt was compounded by the understanding that history, tradition, and public expectation often overshadow personal experience. Harry's grief was not merely for the loss of a title. It was a grief for the erasure of a role he had inhabited, shaped, and cherished throughout his life. For Meghan, the emotional impact was equally profound. She had fought tirelessly to carve out a space for herself within the royal ecosystem, often facing criticism, scrutiny, and isolation. The revocation of Harry's title struck at the core of their shared stability. While she had always been a source of strength for Harry, she now found herself grappling with her own feelings of frustration, helplessness, and, at times, fear. The world was watching, and yet, within the walls of their private life, she confronted a sense of vulnerability that few could comprehend. Family dynamics were further complicated by the presence of William and King Charles, both of whom were entangled in their own web of emotions. William, long considered the stabilizing force within the royal household, faced a complex duality: loyalty to institutional duty on one hand, and familial compassion on the other. King Charles, whose decisions carried both historical weight and personal consequence, experienced the profound burden of balancing responsibility with the emotional fallout. These dynamics created a tense atmosphere in which every action and decision reverberated with significance, touching on issues of trust, expectation, and the bonds of kinship. The emotional strain manifested in private interactions. Conversations that once flowed with familiarity now carried an undertone of caution. Every word spoken, every decision made, was colored by the recent upheaval. Harry, in particular, wrestled with feelings of isolation. Friends and advisors offered support, yet the uniqueness of his situation, being both a public figure and a deeply affected family member, meant that empathy, while abundant, could not fully bridge the emotional chasm. Social media amplified this strain. While support poured in from global audiences, the scrutiny intensified the pressure. Public messages of encouragement were accompanied by criticism, speculation, and sometimes vitriol. Harry and Meghan found themselves navigating a landscape in which personal grief and public opinion collided. The emotional impact was magnified by the knowledge that every expression of vulnerability would be consumed, interpreted, and debated in real time. Counseling and mental health support became crucial. The couple engaged with psychologists and therapists to process their emotions and strategize on coping mechanisms. Techniques to manage stress, grief, and public pressure were explored, yet even the most effective strategies could not entirely remove the emotional weight of losing a title that was intertwined with identity and heritage. The sessions offered solace, but also highlighted the profound challenge of reconciling private pain with public visibility. Even the simplest moments carried emotional significance. A quiet conversation between Harry and Meghan in the privacy of their home became laden with meaning. Each gesture, each look, each word exchanged resonated with the weight of recent events. The loss of the title was not a single moment. It was a ripple, extending into every interaction, every decision, every aspect of daily life. Family gatherings, once marked by routine familiarity, now felt charged with tension. The presence of media, the anticipation of public reaction, and the knowledge of internal friction made even casual encounters complicated. Advisors reported that attempts at mediation were ongoing but fraught with difficulty, as historical grievances and recent wounds combined to create a complex emotional landscape. The couple's children, though shielded from much of the public discussion, were nonetheless affected. Awareness of family tension, changes in parental demeanor, and glimpses of public debate seeped into their world. The need to protect the children while managing personal emotions added another layer of responsibility and stress for Harry and Meghan. Every decision was weighed not just for personal consequence, but for the impact on their family's well-being and stability. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, Harry and Meghan found moments of resilience. Private rituals, shared routines, and small victories provided grounding. Whether through quiet conversations, moments of laughter, or deliberate acts of support, they navigated their grief in tandem. These moments were fleeting, but powerful. Reminders that even in the face of loss, the bonds of family and partnership could provide solace. Advisors noted that the couple's strategy was evolving. Public statements, private communications, and interactions with extended family were carefully calibrated to balance emotion with diplomacy. Every word released, every gesture made, was a deliberate act designed to preserve dignity, manage perception, and protect relationships. Yet, the emotional undercurrent was unmistakable, shaping decisions in ways both visible and hidden from the public eye. The broader royal family observed the emotional fallout with a mix of concern and strategy. While the decision had been executed, the ongoing emotional implications were unpredictable. Navigating these complex dynamics required sensitivity, foresight, and the recognition that personal grief could not be entirely separated from public consequence. The delicate balance between authority, compassion, and familial responsibility became the defining challenge of this period. The emotional fallout was not confined to private spaces. Public appearances, media interviews, and philanthropic events were now colored by heightened tension. Every interaction was interpreted, every expression scrutinized, and every choice evaluated for both emotional and political impact. The couple's ability to navigate these pressures while maintaining authenticity became a central focus, with long-term implications for personal identity and family legacy. Ultimately, the loss of a title served as a catalyst, exposing vulnerabilities, testing relationships, and revealing the depth of emotional complexity inherent in royal life. Harry and Meghan's journey through grief, frustration, and resilience underscored the human dimension of monarchy, reminding the world that behind the titles, crowns, and ceremonies were individuals grappling with profound emotions, personal identity, and the ever-present tension between private life and public expectation. Almost immediately after the announcement, the media erupted. News outlets across the globe flashed headlines that seemed designed to shock and provoke, each one framing the story in a slightly different, yet equally dramatic, light. The moment had been meticulously timed to reach millions simultaneously, ensuring that the emotional impact of the story would ripple across continents. Television anchors delivered breaking news bulletins with gravitas, while online platforms exploded with viral posts, memes, and commentary. The sheer volume of coverage was staggering, and for Harry and Meghan, the experience was overwhelming, to say the least. In London, newspapers ran special editions, each cover more sensational than the last. The front pages featured images of Harry in solemn poses, sometimes juxtaposed with the smiling, poised expressions of William and Charles. Headlines alternated between sympathetic narratives and sharply critical commentaries, ranging from "The Prince No More" to "Royal Rebellion Ends in Stripped Title." Some tabloids speculated on the personal conflict that had driven the decision, while others framed it as a historic precedent with political and social ramifications. Across the Atlantic, the United States media approached the story with its own brand of sensationalism. Cable news networks provided round-the-clock analysis, often featuring panels of experts, royal correspondents, and cultural commentators debating the implications. Every detail, from the legal justification of revoking a title to the emotional toll on the family, was dissected in real time. Meghan's presence in the narrative was highlighted repeatedly, with some reports framing her as an ally, others suggesting she played a role in escalating tensions. The coverage was relentless, ensuring that Harry's loss of status was no longer just a private family matter. It was a global event. Social media, as always, became a battleground of opinions. Twitter threads surged with thousands of reactions per minute, blending news updates, rumors, memes, and heated debate. Hashtags trended, such as hashtag Prince Harry No More, hashtag Royal Drama, and hashtag Stripped Title, drawing attention from fans, critics, and casual observers alike. Instagram stories and TikTok videos presented reactions ranging from emotional support to biting satire. Influencers and celebrities weighed in, some defending Harry, others critiquing him for perceived missteps, and a few simply using the story to drive engagement. The sheer speed and breadth of social media amplified the emotional intensity, creating a pressure cooker environment in which every statement by the couple or the royal family could ignite another wave of global discussion. The reactions were not just limited to entertainment and celebrity media. Political commentators and cultural analysts explored the broader implications. Some framed the decision as a necessary assertion of royal authority, emphasizing tradition and responsibility. Others questioned the timing and motives, highlighting the potential risks of alienating younger generations who follow Harry and Meghan closely. Discussions of constitutional precedent emerged, with scholars debating the legal and symbolic weight of stripping a royal title in the modern age. It became clear that the story was no longer merely about family dynamics. It was a multi-layered phenomenon with emotional, cultural, and political dimensions. Television networks produced special segments, often using emotional music and dramatic visuals to heighten the sense of urgency and tragedy. Royal correspondents interviewed former aides, palace insiders, and biographers, each offering perspectives that ranged from sympathetic to critical. One commentator noted, "This is a moment that will define the monarchy in the 21st century. It's about authority, yes, but it's also about human relationships, and those are never simple." The framing of the narrative balanced historical context with emotional storytelling, emphasizing the stakes for both the individuals involved and the institution as a whole. Public opinion was sharply divided. Polls conducted in the UK revealed a mixture of sympathy for Harry and support for the royal family's decision, depending on the demographic and political leaning of respondents. Younger audiences often expressed outrage at the perceived harshness of the action, while older generations tended to highlight the importance of tradition and order. Online comment sections became arenas of debate, with arguments about personal freedom, loyalty, and the responsibilities inherent in royal life. The conversations were raw, emotional, and often polarized, reflecting the deep connection that people feel to both the monarchy and the narrative of family drama. For Harry and Meghan, navigating the media storm was both necessary and excruciating. Every public appearance, statement, and social media post had to be carefully considered. Missteps could be magnified exponentially, while silence risked feeding speculation. Their advisors worked tirelessly, crafting responses that balanced emotional authenticity with strategic messaging. Interviews were rehearsed, press statements meticulously reviewed, and public engagements calculated for impact. Yet, no level of preparation could entirely mitigate the emotional intensity of seeing their private lives projected onto a global stage in such a scrutinizing manner. Some media outlets, seeking to humanize Harry and Meghan, focused on the emotional toll. Stories recounted the couple's long-standing efforts to navigate public life while raising a family under constant observation. Reports highlighted moments of personal sacrifice, emotional vulnerability, and resilience. These narratives offered audiences a glimpse into the human side of the monarchy, challenging the more sensationalized coverage and evoking empathy for the couple. In contrast, other outlets leaned heavily into scandal, emphasizing tension, conflict, and perceived failures. The juxtaposition of these narratives created a complex media landscape in which perception could shift rapidly depending on the source of information. International coverage added yet another layer. Countries with historical ties to the British monarchy watched closely, their media reflecting both curiosity and cultural connection. In Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, newspapers explored the broader implications of Harry's loss of title for Commonwealth relationships, while commentators debated whether the action signaled a more modern, assertive monarchy or a potentially divisive decision. Global audiences were captivated by the emotional drama, political implications, and personal stakes intertwined in the story, ensuring that Harry's situation remained a focal point for weeks on end. The media storm also had tangible effects on business and philanthropy. Brands associated with the couple, previously seen as royal endorsements, experienced heightened scrutiny. Nonprofit initiatives and public engagements were now filtered through the lens of the title revocation, altering public perception and, in some cases, participation. Every move was dissected for hidden meaning, strategic intent, or evidence of personal friction. The intertwining of media perception with real-world consequences added urgency to the couple's communication strategy and emphasized the pervasive impact of public narrative on private lives. Memes and viral content, while lighter in tone, played a subtle role in shaping public sentiment. Humor often acted as a coping mechanism for audiences trying to process the drama, while simultaneously influencing opinions. Some memes depicted Harry as a tragic figure, stripped of identity and status, while others satirized the monarchy or highlighted the tension between the brothers. The fast-moving, participatory nature of social media created a feedback loop, amplifying certain narratives while minimizing others, and forcing Harry and Meghan to adapt continually to the shifting landscape of public discourse. The media storm, however, was not solely negative. Supporters rallied in unprecedented ways. Online petitions, fan forums, and social media campaigns offered messages of encouragement, solidarity, and advocacy for the couple. Influential public figures voiced their support, framing the revocation of Harry's title as unjust and urging for reconciliation. This wave of support, while emotionally validating, also heightened the pressure to respond strategically, as any misstep could undermine public sympathy or reignite criticism. Even within traditional media, the storytelling took on cinematic qualities. Documentaries, feature segments, and in-depth profiles explored the historical and personal contexts of the monarchy, blending archival footage, interviews, and narration to dramatize the story. The combination of visual storytelling, emotional depth, and historical analysis created a sense of immediacy and importance, reinforcing the perception that Harry's loss of title was not only a family matter, but a cultural event of significant historical weight. As the media storm raged, Harry and Meghan were forced to reconcile their private emotions with public expectation. The emotional fallout of losing a title was magnified by the global scrutiny, making every gesture, every word, and every appearance a delicate balancing act. The couple's challenge was not merely to survive the storm, but to navigate it with dignity, protect their family, and assert their personal narrative in a media environment that thrived on drama, speculation, and conflict. In retrospect, the media coverage surrounding the loss of Harry's title exemplified the power of narrative in shaping public perception. Sensational headlines, emotional storytelling, and real-time analysis converged to create a global phenomenon. Yet, beneath the headlines, the human element, the feelings of betrayal, grief, frustration, and resilience remained central. The storm was both external and internal, a reflection of the complex interplay between public image and private reality, and a reminder that in the age of instant information, personal tragedy can become a worldwide spectacle in moments. The announcement of Harry's loss of his royal title did not just ignite a media frenzy. It opened a deeply personal and painful chapter in the relationship between him, his brother William, and their father, King Charles. For decades, their lives had been intertwined with duty, expectation, and the weight of legacy, but this decision illuminated fissures that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. What had once been familial bonds grounded in shared history and upbringing now appeared fragile, strained, and, in some cases, irreparably damaged. Within the walls of Buckingham Palace, whispers of tension were nothing new. Insiders had long spoken of the subtle, yet palpable, strains between the brothers. From childhood rivalries magnified by public scrutiny to differences in temperament and outlook, the seeds of conflict had existed for years. However, none of these early tensions had ever escalated into something that the world could see in such a visible and irreversible form. This decision marked the culmination of decades of private disagreements, misunderstandings, and deeply felt grievances. King Charles, who had always maintained a stoic public persona, reportedly agonized over the decision. Privately, he was described as meticulous, weighing every potential consequence, from the legal implications to the emotional fallout. His advisors debated extensively, analyzing precedent, potential public reactions, and the symbolic weight of the revocation. Yet, At the heart of the matter was a man caught between his role as a monarch, charged with maintaining the dignity and cohesion of the royal institution, and his role as a father, whose decisions directly impacted the emotional well-being of his children. The moment of confrontation between Charles and Harry, as sources later revealed, was tense and emotionally charged. The atmosphere was reportedly heavy with silence, punctuated by brief exchanges that reflected both frustration and unresolved hurt. Charles emphasized the importance of duty and tradition, framing the revocation as a necessary step for the integrity of the monarchy. Harry, in turn, expressed feelings of betrayal and alienation, perceiving the action not only as a loss of status, but as a deeply personal rejection. The dialogue was more than a disagreement over protocol. It was a collision of identity, expectation, and deeply rooted emotion. William's role in this dynamic added another layer of complexity. As the heir apparent, his position required a delicate balancing act, supporting his father while managing his relationship with his younger brother. Observers noted that William, while publicly composed, was privately struggling with conflicting loyalties. On one hand, he recognized the necessity of upholding family tradition and protecting the monarchy's image. On the other hand, the bond with Harry, formed through shared childhood experiences, adventures, and hardships, was undeniable. The tension between familial loyalty and institutional responsibility created a unique and painful strain, forcing him into a role that neither brother could fully control. The rift was not limited to private discussions within the palace. Leaks to the press suggested moments of intense argument and silent standoffs, punctuated by long periods of avoidance. Some insiders claimed that Harry had felt isolated, believing that William and Charles were aligned against him. Others suggested that Charles had been attempting to reach a compromise, only to find that emotions and pride on all sides had rendered reconciliation difficult. The situation was emblematic of the complexities of family life under extraordinary public scrutiny, where even the smallest disagreements could be magnified, interpreted, and judged on a global stage. The emotional toll on Harry was profound. Losing a title that had been a part of his identity since birth was not merely a bureaucratic adjustment. It represented a rupture in how he viewed himself, his place in the world, and his relationship with his family. Psychologists interviewed in the wake of the announcement highlighted the significance of such a loss, noting that titles, symbols, and roles often serve as anchors for personal identity. When these are suddenly removed, it can trigger feelings of grief, rejection, and uncertainty. Harry's reported emotional reaction, described as a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief, reflected these psychological dynamics, underscoring the deeply human side of what the world initially saw as a public spectacle. The impact on William was also layered and complex. As the future king, his responsibilities demanded adherence to protocol, tradition, and the careful maintenance of public perception. Yet, as a brother, he was confronted with witnessing someone he had shared a lifetime with face a painful, public diminution. Conversations between the brothers, both private and mediated by advisors, reportedly oscillated between attempts at understanding, emotional confrontation, and moments of silence that spoke volumes. Observers noted that even in the absence of words, the tension was palpable, a reminder that familial relationships are often defined as much by what is left unsaid as by what is openly communicated. Charles, meanwhile, bore the weight of historical context. Every decision he made would be scrutinized not just in the present, but through the lens of history. Monarchs are rarely remembered solely for their private decisions. They are measured by how they balance personal relationships with institutional stability. The choice to strip Harry of his title was thus more than a personal or familial act. It was a calculated move with symbolic resonance, representing both authority and the preservation of the monarchy's public image. The delicate interplay between fatherly concern and royal responsibility created a situation fraught with emotion, strategy, and inevitable fallout. The tension extended to public appearances and official engagements. Harry's absence from key family events was interpreted through multiple lenses, as protest, as alienation, and as a demonstration of independence. William and Charles, meanwhile, were observed navigating ceremonial duties with precision, projecting unity and stability despite the underlying family strain. For the public, these subtle cues became a source of speculation, feeding narratives of rivalry, estrangement, and emotional distance. Every handshake, every smile, and every carefully orchestrated pose was analyzed, interpreted, and debated, reflecting the impossibility of separating personal emotion from public expectation within the royal family. Counseling and advisory efforts reportedly intensified in the weeks following the decision. Family therapists, legal advisors, and communication specialists were brought in to manage both the emotional fallout and the public narrative. The goal was not only to mitigate immediate tension, but to anticipate future conflicts and ensure that the family's internal disputes did not undermine the broader stability of the monarchy. Despite these interventions, sources indicated that progress was slow and fragile, with moments of reconciliation often offset by renewed tension and unresolved grievances. Historical comparisons were often drawn, illustrating that sibling and familial conflicts have long been part of the monarchy's narrative. From disputed inheritances to political intrigue, royal families have navigated internal disputes under public scrutiny for centuries. Yet, the contemporary context, characterized by social media, 24-hour news cycles, and global connectivity, amplified the emotional impact exponentially. The decisions and reactions of Harry, William, and Charles were now played out not only in palace corridors but across continents, in real time, with millions of observers forming opinions and judgments on a moment-by-moment basis. Despite the tension, there were small moments of human connection that persisted. Insiders noted brief exchanges that suggested care and concern, even amidst disagreement. A shared memory referenced, a private gesture unnoticed by the public eye, or a subtle tone of voice in conversation, all reflected the enduring bond that exists beneath conflict. These moments, while fleeting, offered glimpses into the complexity of familial relationships, reminding observers that even in the most dramatic rifts, love, loyalty, and history continue to shape interactions. Analysts highlighted that the long-term impact of this rift would depend not just on public perception but on the capacity for reconciliation. Trust, once fractured, requires time, effort, and mutual understanding to rebuild. The emotional consequences of this period, loss of status, feelings of betrayal, and public scrutiny, would inevitably shape Harry's identity, his relationship with William, and the broader dynamics within the royal family for years to come. The decision to strip a title was thus not merely administrative. It was deeply symbolic, marking a turning point in both personal and institutional history. The public reaction to the family tension added another layer of complexity. Social media, opinion polls, and online commentary often framed the story as a moral or ethical debate, questioning loyalty, duty, and personal responsibility. Harry was seen as both a victim and a provocateur, William as a dutiful enforcer, and Charles as a patriarch balancing the impossible demands of monarchy and fatherhood. These narratives, while reductive in some ways, reflected the broader human desire to understand and interpret complex emotional situations through recognizable archetypes. By the end of this period, it became clear that the decision to strip Harry of his title had fundamentally altered the dynamics of the royal family. The tension between father and son, and between brothers, was no longer a private matter. It had become a defining feature of public discourse, historical record, and cultural conversation. The emotional and psychological reverberations would continue to influence decisions, relationships, and public perception, creating a long-lasting legacy of both conflict and introspection. The chapter of family rift, while painful and complex, underscored the human dimension of the monarchy. Beyond titles, protocols, and ceremonies, the story revealed a deeply personal struggle with identity, loyalty, and emotional bonds. It highlighted that even within one of the most scrutinized families in the world, emotions are raw, decisions carry profound weight, and the consequences of conflict are enduring. In the end, the loss of Harry's title was not just a public statement. It was a catalyst for reflection, healing, and, perhaps, eventual reconciliation in ways that history and time would ultimately reveal. The moment the news broke that Prince Harry was officially stripped of his royal title, the world erupted. Headlines flashed across newspapers, websites, and social media feeds within minutes. What had been a private family matter suddenly became a global spectacle, a story that dominated conversations from London to Los Angeles, from Sydney to New Delhi. For many, the announcement was shocking, almost unbelievable, and the reactions varied widely, from outrage to sympathy, from speculation to condemnation. The sheer speed and intensity of public response demonstrated not only the power of modern media, but also the fascination and emotional investment people have in the British monarchy. Social media was the first battleground of opinion. Platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok were flooded with trending hashtags. Hashtag Prince Harry, hashtag royal titles, hashtag Charles decision, hashtag William and Harry, and countless variations that reflected the diverse reactions of millions. Commentators, influencers, and ordinary citizens voiced their opinions with fervor. Some users expressed sympathy for Harry, arguing that the decision was harsh, unfair, and emotionally devastating for someone who had already endured years of scrutiny and personal challenges. Others defended the monarchy, citing tradition, duty, and the necessity of maintaining the dignity of royal titles. Every post, every share, every meme became a microcosm of public debate, reflecting the polarized and passionate responses that the announcement provoked. Mainstream media outlets quickly mobilized to cover the story from every angle. News anchors, journalists, and royal correspondents provided live updates, expert interviews, and historical context. Articles explored the legal and constitutional implications of removing a prince's title, detailing how unprecedented or rare such actions were in the modern era. Some pieces delved into historical precedents, referencing past instances of royal titles being revoked or suspended due to scandal, defection, or political pressure. These segments often highlighted the symbolic weight of titles, not just as markers of status, but as reflections of duty, lineage, and cultural heritage. Analysts on major networks debated the reasoning behind the decision. Royal experts offered insight into the possible motivations of King Charles, ranging from consolidating authority and protecting the monarchy's image to responding to ongoing media controversies involving Harry. Discussions considered how this decision might influence the younger generation of royals, including William, George, Charlotte, and Louis, framing the revocation as a teaching moment or a reinforcement of expectations for those in line for the throne. Meanwhile, commentators speculated about the long-term implications for Harry's personal life, career opportunities, and public image, highlighting the tension between private grief and public scrutiny. Opinion columns were equally intense, with writers questioning morality, loyalty, and family dynamics. Some argued that stripping Harry of his title was a necessary step to uphold tradition and discipline within the monarchy. Others framed it as an emotionally cold, almost punitive act, pointing to the psychological toll of such public shaming. Letters to editors, online comment sections, and discussion forums became arenas of debate, often reflecting generational and cultural divides and perspectives on monarchy, authority, and personal freedom. People argued passionately about what the monarchy represented and how it should balance heritage with compassion. Public demonstrations and protests emerged in some cities. In London, crowds gathered outside royal residences, waving banners and chanting slogans both for and against the decision. Supporters of Harry held signs reading "Support Harry" and "Royalty isn't always right," while monarchists displayed banners emphasizing duty, tradition, and respect for the crown. Social media live streams captured moments of confrontation, heated debates, and emotional speeches, further fueling global engagement. Observers noted the intensity of public emotion, emphasizing that the monarchy's decisions, while symbolic, had real-world resonance and impact on public sentiment. Celebrities and influencers weighed in as well, amplifying the story through their platforms. Statements of support for Harry appeared from well-known actors, athletes, and public figures who had either personal connections or ideological alignment with him. Conversely, others publicly defended the monarchy, emphasizing responsibility, respect, and the importance of tradition. These celebrity reactions often became viral, attracting millions of views, retweets, and shares, further heightening the global conversation. In some cases, social media engagement turned into online campaigns, petitions, and fundraising efforts, reflecting the deeply personal connection that people felt to this unfolding drama. The international response was equally remarkable. In countries with historical ties to Britain, such as Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, media outlets provided extensive coverage, reflecting both local interest and broader cultural engagement. In regions like the United States, the story was covered not only by mainstream networks but also by tabloid-style outlets, which highlighted the sensational aspects, including personal drama, family tension, and emotional fallout. News channels in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East similarly dedicated airtime to the story, underscoring the monarchy's global influence and the universal appeal of familial and institutional conflict. Financial analysts and business commentators even entered the conversation, noting that the revocation could have implications for Harry's commercial ventures, public appearances, and charitable endeavors. Sponsorship deals, speaking engagements, and brand partnerships were speculated upon, with some predicting a potential shift in marketability now that Harry's official royal status had changed. The intersection of celebrity, royalty, and economics created a multidimensional narrative, illustrating how intertwined personal status, public perception, and financial opportunity can become in the modern age. The media also explored Harry's personal response, providing insight into his emotional state and possible next steps. Sources close to the prince suggested that he experienced a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief, coupled with determination to redefine his identity outside the traditional framework of royalty. Interviews with friends, confidants, and advisors painted a portrait of a man grappling with the sudden loss of both a title and a symbolic connection to family and legacy. The narrative often emphasized resilience, portraying Harry as someone forced to adapt to circumstances beyond his control while navigating intense public scrutiny. Experts in psychology and social behavior offered additional commentary on the public fascination with the story. They highlighted that high-profile figures, particularly those connected to iconic institutions like the monarchy, often become proxies for collective emotion. People project their own values, frustrations, and hopes onto these figures, creating an emotionally charged dialogue that transcends the individuals directly involved. The decision to strip Harry of his title, therefore, was not just a personal or institutional act. It became a catalyst for collective reflection, debate, and emotional engagement on a global scale. Throughout the frenzy, memes, commentary videos, and viral posts proliferated, blending humor, satire, and analysis. While some treated the story with gravity, others approached it with irreverence, creating content that mocked, dramatized, or reimagined the unfolding events. This cultural phenomenon illustrated the dual nature of public reaction: serious engagement with profound implications, intertwined with playful, creative expression that reflected how people process complex news in the digital age. The media narrative also delved into comparisons with Meghan Markle and her previous experiences within the royal family. Stories highlighted perceived double standards, instances of public scrutiny, and historical grievances, emphasizing the intertwined nature of the Sussexes' public and private lives. By drawing connections between Harry's experience and broader family dynamics, journalists and commentators created a multidimensional story that combined personal struggle, familial tension, and institutional symbolism. Political figures and commentators occasionally weighed in, framing the story in terms of national identity, tradition, and governance. Some viewed the decision as a reinforcement of the monarchy's symbolic authority, emphasizing the importance of maintaining order and consistency. Others questioned whether such decisions were appropriate in a modern constitutional monarchy, sparking debate about the balance between heritage, accountability, and personal rights. These discussions often intersected with public sentiment, creating a layered narrative in which every perspective, monarchist, reformist, sympathetic, or critical, found representation. The media coverage extended beyond print, digital, and television. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and online discussion panels became hubs of analysis, speculation, and commentary. Hosts dissected timelines, interpreted statements, and predicted possible outcomes for both Harry and the monarchy. These platforms provided space for in-depth exploration of emotional nuances, historical context, and potential ramifications, attracting audiences seeking deeper understanding and engagement beyond traditional reporting. In the midst of this global attention, Harry himself reportedly made decisions regarding communication and public engagement. Legal advisors, publicists, and family confidants assisted in crafting responses that balanced emotional authenticity with strategic consideration. Every statement, every public appearance, and every carefully released message was scrutinized, amplified, and interpreted, illustrating the intricate dance between personal expression and media perception. By the end of the first week, the story had transcended the immediate news cycle, becoming a symbol of larger societal debates. Themes of family loyalty, authority, tradition, personal identity, and public accountability resonated across cultures and demographics. People were not simply following a story about royalty. They were engaging with universal questions of power, fairness, emotion, and human connection. The media frenzy, fueled by instantaneous communication and global connectivity, ensured that the consequences of the decision would echo far beyond the palace walls, shaping public discourse and perception for months, if not years, to come. The revocation of his royal title was more than a public announcement. It was a deeply personal upheaval. For Prince Harry, this was not simply about losing a prefix or a ceremonial designation. Being stripped of the title prince meant the erasure of a lifetime of identity, an official severing of the public and historical recognition that had defined him from birth. From the moment the news was formally delivered, Harry found himself navigating a complex emotional landscape where grief, anger, confusion, and shame intertwined, making every step forward feel uncertain and heavy. In the early hours following the announcement, Harry reportedly retreated into solitude. Friends and close confidants described a man grappling with shock and disbelief. The halls of his residence, once filled with the laughter of family life, meetings, and ceremonial obligations, now felt eerily quiet, suffused with a palpable sense of isolation. Those who spoke with him during this period noted a visible tension in his demeanor, an anxious restlessness that betrayed the inner turmoil consuming him. Even casual gestures, a glance at a photograph, or a news clip on television could trigger waves of emotion, reminders that the life he had known was suddenly, irrevocably altered. One of the most challenging aspects of this transition was the loss of recognition in both public and private spheres. Titles carry power, yes, but they also carry identity. They confer a sense of place within an intricate hierarchy, signaling connection to lineage, tradition, and responsibility. For Harry, being a prince had been more than a label. It was a framework through which he understood himself, a lens that defined relationships, expectations, and opportunities. Losing that designation meant confronting the disorienting reality of life as a private citizen, stripped of both privilege and public affirmation. Psychologists who spoke with media outlets suggested that Harry was likely experiencing a combination of identity grief and anticipatory anxiety. Identity grief occurs when an individual loses a role or status that has been central to their self-concept for an extended period. Unlike more conventional forms of grief, which are tied to people or tangible losses, identity grief is profoundly existential, questioning the very essence of who a person believes themselves to be. In Harry's case, the title of prince had been intertwined with notions of duty, purpose, and self-worth. The sudden removal of that identity likely prompted deep reflection, emotional vulnerability, and an urgent need to reconstruct a new sense of self. Adding to the complexity was the public nature of the loss. Harry was not dealing with private disappointment alone. Every thought, feeling, and reaction was magnified by global scrutiny. Social media, news outlets, and online commentary acted as mirrors and amplifiers, reflecting public opinion in real time. For someone whose life had been subjected to relentless observation for decades, this exposure was psychologically taxing. Ordinary coping mechanisms, such as retreating from stress or seeking private solace, were complicated by the knowledge that privacy itself was fragile and constantly under threat. Family dynamics further compounded the emotional burden. Harry's relationship with King Charles and Prince William had long been fraught with tension, misunderstandings, and unspoken grievances. While disputes and differences are common in any family, the stakes were exponentially higher given the royal context. Losing his title was not merely a procedural adjustment. It symbolized a rupture in trust and recognition from his father and elder brother. Confidence reported that Harry wrestled with feelings of rejection, hurt, and betrayal, emotions that were difficult to reconcile even with years of counseling and personal development. The decision forced him to re-examine the very foundation of his familial bonds, questioning loyalty, love, and the nature of authority in his life. In addition to emotional challenges, Harry faced practical considerations. A royal title provides access, security, and influence. Without it, he needed to reassess his role in charitable organizations, his public appearances, and professional ventures. Opportunities that were once straightforward, facilitated by recognition and status, now required negotiation, rebranding, and personal initiative. The transition was not merely symbolic, it was operational, affecting daily routines, career decisions, and long-term planning. Every contract, invitation, or collaborative effort had to be reconsidered through the lens of this new reality. Harry also struggled with the paradox of visibility and invisibility. Though no longer a prince in title, he remained one of the most recognized and scrutinized figures globally. Paparazzi followed his every move, social media buzzed with speculation about his next steps, and public fascination with his life did not diminish. Yet, despite this attention, the formal acknowledgement, the ceremonial validation, and the historical legacy that accompanied a princely title were gone. The dichotomy between fame and formal recognition created cognitive dissonance, a feeling of being both significant and diminished simultaneously, a public figure without the symbolic weight that once legitimized his presence. Friends who spoke with him during this period described long nights of reflection. Harry reportedly revisited old journals, photographs, and family memorabilia, seeking to reconcile past memories with present circumstances. Childhood recollections, moments of ceremony, and intimate family gatherings were tinged with bittersweet emotion, reminders of both privilege and the pressures that came with it. These reflections were not purely nostalgic. They represented an attempt to reconstruct identity, to anchor himself in personal meaning amid upheaval. Counseling and mental health support became central to his coping strategy. Confidential sources suggested that Harry leaned heavily on therapists, confidants, and support networks, addressing both immediate emotional responses and longer-term identity concerns. Techniques included mindfulness, guided reflection, narrative therapy, and structured goal setting. The aim was to help him navigate the emotional storm while creating a framework for self-definition independent of royal validation. Mental health professionals emphasized the importance of acknowledging grief, resisting impulsive public reactions, and constructing a personal narrative that embraced resilience rather than resentment. Another layer of struggle emerged from public perception. Media outlets and social commentators debated Harry's response, sometimes framing it as entitled, reactive, or self-pitying. Each statement, appearance, or silence was interpreted, dissected, and judged. The prince had to navigate not only his internal processing, but also the optics of every action. Maintaining dignity and composure became an essential part of coping, an additional mental load that required constant attention and strategic planning. At the same time, Harry sought ways to maintain meaningful engagement with causes he cared about deeply. Charitable work, mental health advocacy, and veteran support projects provided purpose and a sense of continuity. These endeavors offered a dual function. They allowed him to contribute positively to society and provided an avenue for personal validation beyond the royal title. By focusing on tangible impact, he could redefine his identity around action and purpose rather than formal designation, crafting a legacy that was both authentic and resilient. The emotional journey was further complicated by concerns for his family. Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet were central to his life, and Harry grappled with how the change in status might affect their sense of security, identity, and public exposure. Protecting them became a priority, influencing decisions about media engagement, residence, and public appearances. His struggle was not solitary. It extended to the family unit, intertwining personal coping with parental responsibility and familial strategy. Despite the weight of these challenges, Harry displayed signs of adaptability and resilience. Confidence noted moments of clarity, purpose, and determination, indicating that he was gradually reframing the loss not as a finality, but as an opportunity for reinvention. Conversations about public projects, personal goals, and future plans suggested a shift towards self-authorship, where identity was defined not by titles or external validation, but by values, choices, and personal integrity. Yet, the path was far from linear. Emotional setbacks, public pressure, and the ongoing media cycle continually tested his resilience. Every engagement, announcement, and social media update became a potential flashpoint, requiring careful navigation. The struggle was continuous, demanding emotional intelligence, strategic foresight, and an unwavering commitment to personal authenticity. Harry's private struggle in the wake of losing his title highlights the profound intersection of identity, status, and personal meaning. It illustrates that the loss of a symbolic designation can ripple through every dimension of life: psychological, relational, practical, and existential. For Harry, the challenge was not simply to survive the public storm, but to reconstruct a self that was whole, meaningful, and resilient, independent of external markers of recognition. The prince's journey in this chapter of his life underscores universal themes of human experience. The difficulty of redefining oneself amid loss, the tension between public perception and private reality, and the enduring need for connection, purpose, and personal authenticity. As the world watched, Harry's struggle became a mirror for broader questions about identity, resilience, and the courage required to navigate profound change. The announcement that Prince Harry was officially stripped of his royal title sent shockwaves through the corridors of Buckingham Palace, but the drama was far from over behind the gilded walls. Public statements and media coverage gave one version of events, polished and deliberate, but inside the palace, the situation was far more layered, fraught with tension, strategy, and unspoken emotions. To understand the full magnitude of this decision, one must look beyond the headlines and into the private deliberations, the whispered consultations, and the intricate dance of protocol, loyalty, and legacy that defined life at the heart of the British monarchy. Sources close to the palace described a climate of urgency and high stakes. King Charles, having assumed the mantle of monarch, faced immense pressure to balance tradition, public expectation, and personal judgment. The decision to strip Harry of his title was not spontaneous. It followed weeks, even months, of counsel with senior royal advisors, legal experts, and family members. The discussions were reported to be intense, sometimes heated, with strong opinions on both sides of the issue. Some advisors emphasized the importance of preserving the dignity of the monarchy, arguing that allowing Harry to retain his title after repeated breaches of protocol would set a dangerous precedent. Others cautioned against public fallout, warning that punitive measures could deepen familial divisions and provoke a media frenzy with lasting reputational consequences. King Charles was said to approach the situation with a combination of resolve and restraint. Having witnessed years of internal conflict, public scrutiny, and personal strain involving his sons, he understood that decisions regarding titles were more than ceremonial. They were symbols of authority, continuity, and the values underpinning the monarchy. Within the palace, he reportedly stressed that the decision was about upholding the institution and protecting its future, rather than personal vendetta. Nonetheless, the personal dimension was unavoidable. The father-son relationship, already fraught with unresolved tensions and past misunderstandings, added layers of emotional complexity to every discussion. Prince William's involvement was equally pivotal. As the heir apparent, his voice carried weight in both familial and institutional contexts. Sources indicate that William expressed deep concern about the precedent Harry's continued title might set, particularly in light of past controversies and the growing influence of media narratives that often portrayed the family in a negative light. William was reportedly firm yet measured, emphasizing the need for clarity and unity. While some perceived him as cold or calculating, insiders highlighted that his approach was grounded in loyalty to the monarchy and a sense of duty to safeguard its legacy for future generations. Within the palace, the process of finalizing the decision involved a delicate interplay between legal counsel, ceremonial advisors, and communications teams. Every word, every phrasing in official statements was scrutinized. The aim was to ensure that the announcement would be authoritative, unambiguous, and respectful, while also signaling the boundaries of royal protocol. Drafts of statements reportedly went through numerous revisions, balancing firmness with diplomacy, conveying the consequences without inflaming public opinion unnecessarily. Advisors recognized that even the subtlest nuance could be amplified by media coverage, social commentary, and international attention. The private dynamics were charged with emotion. Staff members who had served the family for decades described a palpable tension in the corridors, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Courtiers navigated their own loyalties carefully, balancing professional responsibilities with personal feelings. Many had witnessed the rise of Harry from boyhood to public figure, sharing in moments of triumph and turbulence. For them, the decision to strip him of his title represented not only a procedural action but an emotional rupture, a symbolic shift in the family hierarchy that reverberated through every aspect of palace life. King Charles reportedly held several private meetings with senior family members, emphasizing both the seriousness and necessity of the decision. Sources suggest that he framed the action as a reaffirmation of royal principles, stressing that the monarchy must maintain its integrity and consistency in the eyes of the public. At the same time, he reportedly sought to mitigate personal hurt, acknowledging the difficulty of imposing such a measure on his own son. These conversations were described as candid, sometimes tense, but ultimately centered on the dual goals of institutional preservation and familial communication. The communication strategy surrounding the announcement was another critical component. Palace media advisors understood that public reaction would be intense, global, and instantaneous. Every press release, every statement, and every interview was carefully orchestrated to convey authority while managing potential fallout. Timing was essential. The announcement was scheduled to coincide with a period of lower competing news, ensuring maximum clarity and attention. Social media monitoring teams were mobilized to track responses in real time, providing feedback to palace officials on public sentiment and media framing. Behind the polished statements and carefully chosen words, there was a recognition of the human element. King Charles and Prince William were aware that Harry's reaction would be scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected in real time. Anticipating emotional responses, advisors recommended that communications emphasize the principles at stake, rather than personal grievance, framing the decision as a continuation of tradition rather than a personal confrontation. The hope was to strike a balance between authority and empathy, a delicate task given the intensity of public and familial emotions. The reactions within other branches of the royal family added further complexity. Cousins, extended relatives, and senior royals offered advice, sometimes conflicting, reflecting a range of perspectives on both strategy and familial responsibility. Some were supportive of the action, seeing it as necessary for clarity and stability. Others expressed concern over potential long-term damage to relationships and public perception. These discussions, though private, underscored the multifaceted nature of the monarchy, where every decision intersects with protocol, perception, and personal connection. Meanwhile, palace security and operations teams worked behind the scenes to prepare for potential disruptions. The announcement had the potential to spark demonstrations, media intrusion, and heighten public interest. Security planning was meticulous, covering access points, travel schedules, and contingencies for high-profile appearances. The goal was to ensure that the announcement proceeded without incident while maintaining the safety and dignity of those involved. Even within the personal spaces of Charles and William, the decision weighed heavily. Observers described moments of introspection, quiet reflection, and private consultation with confidants. The burden of leadership was apparent, a reminder that royal authority carries responsibilities that extend far beyond personal preference. Decisions are measured not only against immediate outcomes, but also long-term consequences for the institution, the nation, and the family legacy. Once the public announcement was prepared, rehearsals for messaging and media engagement reportedly took place. Advisors coached statements, anticipated questions, and simulated potential scenarios. Every phrase, inflection, and emphasis was calibrated to project confidence, maintain decorum, and reinforce the legitimacy of the decision. The palace sought to ensure that the narrative was controlled, authoritative, and framed around duty, principle, and continuity. The internal impact on palace staff, while less visible, was significant. Many long-serving members had personal relationships with Harry, witnessing his growth from childhood into adulthood. Their emotional investment made the process difficult, blending professional obligations with personal attachment. Support networks within the palace, including counselors and mentors, were mobilized to manage stress, provide guidance, and maintain morale during a period of heightened tension. For King Charles, the decision represented the intersection of leadership and parental responsibility. Publicly, he was a sovereign charged with upholding centuries of tradition. Privately, he was a father navigating a deeply personal rift. Balancing these roles required judgment, patience, and resilience. Sources indicate that Charles engaged in reflective consideration, consulting advisors, but ultimately taking ownership of the decision. The weight of history, duty, and familial connection converged, making the moment one of both strategic calculation and profound emotional significance. Prince William's role, meanwhile, reflected the dual pressures of heirship and brotherhood. He was tasked with supporting the institution, defending protocol, and managing public perception, all while contending with the emotional complexity of familial relationships. His interactions with Charles, advisors, and extended family were characterized by careful deliberation, measured judgment, and a keen awareness of the stakes involved. Observers note that William's approach combined firmness with a recognition of personal sensitivity, aiming to uphold principle while minimizing unnecessary harm. The cumulative effect of these internal processes was a carefully choreographed orchestration of power, perception, and principle. Every step, from initial deliberation to final announcement, reflected the monarchy's intricate balance between tradition, public duty, and personal dynamics. The decision to strip Harry of his title was not merely a public spectacle. It was the culmination of intense private deliberation, strategic communication, and emotional negotiation behind the scenes. Ultimately, the royal response highlighted the profound tension between personal relationships and institutional responsibility. King Charles and Prince William faced the challenge of executing a decision that was both historically significant and emotionally charged. The process illuminated the complexities of monarchy in the modern era, where centuries-old traditions intersect with contemporary media scrutiny, public opinion, and individual identity. It was a moment that required clarity of purpose, strategic foresight, and emotional resilience, setting the stage for the unfolding story that would capture global attention. As the announcement went public, the reactions of the palace staff, advisors, and extended family would ripple outward, influencing subsequent events, media narratives, and the ongoing evolution of Harry's role within, or now outside, the royal institution. The behind-the-scenes maneuvers, the emotional negotiations, and the careful planning underscored that the monarchy operates not only as a symbol of continuity, but as a complex ecosystem of relationships, power, and legacy. The moment news broke that Prince Harry had been stripped of his royal title, the world reacted with a mixture of disbelief, fascination, and outrage. Social media erupted instantly, news channels interrupted regular programming, and newspapers across continents ran headlines declaring the unprecedented nature of the decision. The story became a viral phenomenon within minutes, dominating online searches, trending hashtags, and late-night talk show commentary. From London to Los Angeles, from Sydney to New Delhi, audiences were glued to screens, eager to witness the fallout of what was quickly being called a historic royal rupture. In the United Kingdom, the public reaction was especially intense. Citizens debated whether the monarchy's actions were justified, with opinions sharply divided along political, generational, and cultural lines. Supporters of King Charles and the institution praised the move as necessary to preserve the dignity of the crown and uphold centuries-old traditions. They argued that Harry's repeated breaches of protocol, public criticisms of the royal family, and engagement in media controversies necessitated a firm response. Commentators in prominent British newspapers framed the action as a statement of authority and a clear reminder that royal privilege comes with accountability. At the same time, critics condemned the decision as harsh, disproportionate, and emotionally cruel. Many voiced concern that stripping Harry of his title would further alienate him from the family and create lasting damage to his mental health and public image. Some social commentators emphasized the psychological impact, highlighting that the act could be seen as punitive rather than corrective. Analysts drew attention to the unprecedented nature of such a move in modern royal history, suggesting that public perception of the monarchy could shift depending on how the situation unfolded in the coming weeks. Television and radio coverage intensified the drama, with anchors dissecting the implications minute by minute. Panels of experts, including historians, former royal correspondents, and public relations specialists, debated the legal, ceremonial, and symbolic ramifications. Some focused on the technical aspects of royal protocol, explaining that a prince's title is not merely honorary but tied to responsibilities, duties, and public representation. Others addressed the emotional and familial dimensions, speculating about strained relationships, possible reconciliations, or further fractures within the royal household. The coverage was relentless, with every potential angle explored, every statement from royal officials analyzed, and every historical precedent cited to contextualize the decision. International media followed closely, recognizing the global fascination with British royalty. Newspapers in Europe, North America, Asia, and the Middle East carried front-page stories, highlighting the unprecedented nature of the action. In the United States, where public interest in Harry and Meghan had already reached fever pitch, the news sparked widespread discussion on social media platforms, talk shows, and news commentary programs. Analysts debated whether the move would affect public perception of the monarchy internationally, considering that Harry and Meghan had cultivated a significant fan base and celebrity status abroad. The reaction on social media was particularly intense, with millions of posts, comments, and shares reflecting both outrage and support. Twitter hashtags related to the event began trending worldwide, including hashtag Prince Harry stripped, hashtag royal drama, and hashtag King Charles decision. Fans of Harry expressed shock and disappointment, framing the action as evidence of unfair treatment or systemic injustice within the royal family. Conversely, royalists and traditionalists defended the decision, emphasizing the importance of accountability and adherence to protocol. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok saw a surge in videos analyzing the decision, sharing reactions, and creating content that blended humor, satire, and serious commentary. Public opinion polls conducted in the aftermath revealed a striking divide. While a segment of the population viewed the revocation of Harry's title as necessary and justified, another significant portion saw it as unnecessarily punitive, risking damage to the monarchy's image. Political analysts noted that such polarizing events could influence public sentiment, particularly in the UK, where the monarchy's relevance and authority are frequently debated. Questions arose about the long-term impact on the royal family's popularity, the relationship between monarchy and media, and the ways in which global audiences perceive the British crown. Social psychologists weighed in, noting the broader implications of public shaming and the power dynamics inherent in such high-profile decisions. The stripping of Harry's title was more than ceremonial. It was a symbolic act with emotional resonance, sending a message about hierarchy, authority, and conformity within an institution that relies heavily on perception and tradition. Experts suggested that such a publicized action could exacerbate divisions both within the family and among the public, while also creating a narrative of conflict that media outlets were eager to amplify. Media outlets also explored the historical context of the decision. While the British monarchy has seen tensions, disputes, and even estrangements in the past, few cases have involved a royal family member being stripped of a title so publicly and definitively. Journalists compared the situation to past instances of royal disagreements, divorces, and disciplinary actions, highlighting both the legal precedent and the exceptional nature of the current scenario. Historical analysis underscored the gravity of the decision and provided audiences with context, showing that the move was not merely a personal vendetta but part of a broader institutional framework. Analysts also examined Harry's media engagements and public appearances prior to the announcement. His high-profile interviews, public critiques of the royal family, and growing independence in personal branding were cited as contributing factors to the decision. By presenting his own narrative through media channels, Harry had challenged traditional expectations of royal discretion, which, according to palace insiders, made the revocation of his title a measure intended to reaffirm authority and preserve institutional boundaries. Public reactions extended to cultural and celebrity commentary. Influencers, actors, and other public figures shared opinions, often amplifying the debate. Some expressed empathy for Harry, emphasizing the human cost of royal obligations and family estrangement. Others framed the decision as a cautionary tale about the responsibilities that accompany status and privilege. Late-night talk show hosts and online commentators used humor and satire to engage audiences, further cementing the story's prominence in public consciousness. The economic and social dimensions of the reaction were notable as well. Media outlets reported spikes in merchandise, books, documentaries, and online content related to Harry and Meghan, suggesting that public interest translated into significant commercial engagement. Analysts predicted that the decision would fuel discussions for months, influencing media programming, advertising strategies, and even tourism to royal landmarks. The story was no longer just about titles. It had become a global cultural phenomenon, a touchpoint for conversations about family, power, and modern monarchy. Meanwhile, public sentiment was also shaped by varying narratives presented by different media organizations. Some outlets focused on the emotional drama, portraying Harry as a sympathetic figure caught in an impossible situation. Others emphasized accountability, duty, and tradition, framing the decision as a necessary correction to perceived missteps. The multiplicity of narratives ensured that the story remained dynamic, unpredictable, and emotionally engaging, prompting ongoing debates and discussions in both professional commentary and everyday conversation. Royal experts highlighted the potential long-term consequences for the institution. Stripping a prince of his title sets a powerful precedent, signaling that public conduct, media engagement, and adherence to protocol carry tangible consequences. This could influence behavior within the royal family for generations, as well as shape public expectations about accountability and the balance between privilege and responsibility. Analysts noted that while the immediate reaction was dramatic, the enduring impact would unfold over years, influencing perceptions of legitimacy, authority, and familial cohesion. As the global discussion unfolded, Harry's own response, or absence thereof, became a focal point. Observers speculated on the potential personal, emotional, and strategic implications. Would he issue a public statement, retreat from media engagements, or pursue legal or symbolic avenues to assert his identity? Each possibility generated speculation and debate, further fueling public attention and ensuring that the story remained at the forefront of global media coverage. By the end of the first 48 hours, it was clear that the revocation of Harry's title had become a landmark moment in modern royal history. It was more than a ceremonial act. It was a catalyst for global discussion, an emotional flashpoint, and a defining instance of how monarchy, media, and public sentiment intersect in the 21st century. The world watched, debated, and speculated, recognizing that this decision would resonate for years to come, not only for Harry and his family, but for the monarchy as an institution and for public consciousness worldwide. The news of Prince Harry being stripped of his royal title reached Meghan Markle in the quiet halls of Frogmore Cottage, where she and Harry had been laying low for weeks. The initial shock was palpable. Sources close to the couple described a moment frozen in disbelief, where the gravity of the announcement seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog. Meghan, who had always been attuned to Harry's emotional state, felt the impact of the decision not only as a member of the family, but as a wife facing public scrutiny. The announcement was not merely a formal declaration. It was a seismic event that would ripple through their personal lives, their public image, and the very foundation of their shared narrative. As Meghan processed the news, emotion swung rapidly from shock to anger, and then to a simmering determination. Friends and confidants later revealed that she spent hours pacing the drawing room, phone in hand, scrolling through breaking news updates and social media reactions. Each new headline felt like a fresh blow. The international media was relentless, framing Harry's demotion in stark terms, while commentators speculated on the consequences for Meghan herself. Would she face similar scrutiny? Would her own titles, privileges, and access to royal recognition be questioned next? These questions pressed heavily on her mind, amplifying the tension of the moment. At Windsor, the palace staff were acutely aware of the emotional weight this announcement carried. Although Meghan was technically outside the immediate line of command within the royal household, her presence at the estate during this period made her visibility unavoidable. Royal aides noted her measured composure, the way she maintained a calm exterior while internally navigating an emotional storm. Sources described her as both resilient and vulnerable, embodying a duality that had become characteristic of her public persona. There was the Meghan the world saw, confident, poised, and composed. And there was the Meghan who had to confront the very real fear of family estrangement, media vilification, and the loss of status that came with Harry's demotion. The couple's private communication channels became a lifeline. Texts, calls, and encrypted video chats between Meghan and Harry revealed the depth of the emotional toll. Meghan's messages reflected a mix of sorrow and resolve, conveying concern for Harry's well-being while simultaneously grappling with her own uncertainty. Friends who later described these conversations highlighted her protective instincts, her immediate drive to shield Harry from external judgment, and her acute awareness that the world was watching every reaction, every expression, and every word she might share publicly. While Meghan was processing the news privately, the outside world was reacting in real time. Headlines questioned her future role in the monarchy, her security arrangements, and the couple's public appearances. Every gesture, from the subtle tilting of her head to the tone of her voice in recorded interviews, was scrutinized and analyzed. Social media commentary ranged from sympathetic to critical, with hashtags trending worldwide. Hashtag Meghan supports Harry, hashtag royal fallout, and hashtag Frogmore drama dominated platforms as fans, critics, and journalists debated her possible next moves. The global attention compounded the pressure, creating a scenario where private grief became inseparable from public performance. Within the walls of Frogmore, Meghan's immediate reaction was a mixture of disbelief and strategic calculation. Those close to her described a woman who quickly assessed the situation, weighing options for both private emotional processing and public positioning. She recognized that how she responded could define not only her relationship with Harry, but also her long-term public image. Sources indicated that Meghan meticulously considered statements, appearances, and even the timing of potential interviews. Every action was measured against potential media narratives and the reaction of both supporters and detractors. The announcement also reignited long-standing anxieties about media intrusion. Meghan had previously expressed frustration at relentless press coverage, alleging harassment, misrepresentation, and a lack of empathy. Now, with Harry's title removed, the media frenzy intensified, reinforcing her concerns. Paparazzi sought glimpses of the couple's residence, while journalists speculated about private conversations and family dynamics. Meghan, aware of the optics, carefully curated her presence, maintaining appearances when necessary while protecting moments of privacy. Trusted aides noted her deliberate approach, balancing transparency with discretion and highlighting her understanding of how personal decisions intersect with public perception. Emotionally, Meghan grappled with complex feelings toward the royal family. The decision to strip Harry of his title was not only a formal action, it carried symbolic weight, signaling disapproval, asserting authority, and redefining relationships. Meghan's reflections on this action were multi-layered. Anger at what she perceived as unnecessary cruelty, disappointment at a perceived lack of familial support, and concern for Harry's emotional well-being. Sources close to the couple described her as simultaneously advocating for Harry, questioning institutional decisions, and preparing to navigate the public fallout with grace and strategic clarity. Interpersonal dynamics were also under strain. Meghan's interactions with household staff, security, and advisors were affected by the heightened tension. Trusted aides noted that she was attentive to details, ensuring that communications, schedules, and public appearances were handled meticulously. While outwardly composed, she maintained a vigilance that reflected both concern for Harry and an awareness of how each interaction could be perceived publicly. This duality, managing private emotion while orchestrating public narrative, became a defining feature of Meghan's approach in the aftermath of Harry's title revocation. Support networks played a crucial role in her emotional processing. Friends in both the UK and the United States provided counsel, emotional support, and practical advice. Some suggested measured public statements to assert solidarity with Harry, while others advised restraint, emphasizing the potential backlash of overt commentary. Meghan carefully navigated these perspectives, balancing her desire to advocate for her husband with the need to avoid escalating tensions within the royal family or provoking negative media scrutiny. Public perception of Meghan also began to shift. International audiences, familiar with her previous struggles and advocacy work, largely interpreted her reaction as a blend of empathy, strength, and protective concern. Media narratives varied. Some portrayed her as a devoted wife, steadfast and emotionally resilient. Others suggested that she might leverage the situation for personal or public gain. The spectrum of interpretation added layers of complexity, challenging Meghan to navigate both reality and perception simultaneously. Emotionally, the initial shock gave way to a strategic determination. Meghan reportedly began planning ways to maintain influence and visibility while supporting Harry. Discussions with advisors included potential engagements, public statements, and media appearances. Every decision was measured, factoring in public reaction, familial relations, and personal well-being. This phase of deliberation highlighted her acumen in managing complex interpersonal, institutional, and media dynamics under intense pressure. The couple's legal and financial advisors were also engaged during this period, analyzing potential implications of Harry's title revocation. While Meghan's reaction was deeply personal, there was an awareness of tangible consequences. Advisors reviewed protocols, inheritance considerations, security arrangements, and official privileges. Meghan's involvement in these discussions reflected a proactive approach, ensuring that both she and Harry remained informed, protected, and capable of making calculated decisions amidst emotional upheaval. As days passed, Meghan's public composure contrasted sharply with the private emotional intensity. Observers noted a disciplined exterior, poised appearances at charitable events, measured statements in public forums, and controlled interactions with media personnel. Behind closed doors, however, Meghan reportedly experienced a range of emotions, from frustration to sorrow, from anxiety to steely resolve. This dual existence, managing both emotional authenticity and public expectation, became a defining feature of her response. Friends noted that Meghan's focus increasingly shifted toward advocacy and strategic communication. She sought to shape the narrative around Harry's title revocation, emphasizing human dignity, fairness, and the importance of familial support. Statements, interviews, and appearances were carefully considered, balancing personal expression with the broader implications for public perception. Meghan's efforts highlighted a sophisticated understanding of modern media, reputation management, and emotional intelligence, allowing her to navigate a turbulent period with both resilience and tactical foresight. The emotional fallout was compounded by anticipation of future public scrutiny. Meghan, aware of the media's relentless attention, anticipated ongoing commentary about Harry, herself, and their children. Planning for the short and long term became a necessity, encompassing security, public engagements, and private family matters. Her proactive approach, friends and aides noted, was informed by prior experiences with media intrusion and the ongoing need to protect both personal and family well-being. In summary, Meghan's reaction to Harry's title revocation was multifaceted, encompassing shock, sorrow, protective instincts, strategic thinking, and public composure. The announcement was not only a defining moment for Harry, but also a pivotal juncture for Meghan, testing her resilience, judgment, and capacity to navigate an intensely publicized personal crisis. Sources emphasize that this period marked a crucial stage in shaping both her role within the family and her public persona, underscoring the complex interplay of emotion, strategy, and visibility in the life of a modern royal. The shock of being stripped of his royal title left Prince Harry standing at a crossroads, both personally and publicly. The announcement by King Charles was more than just a ceremonial demotion. It was a seismic shift in Harry's identity, reshaping his role within the monarchy, altering his public responsibilities, and forcing him to reconsider his personal and professional trajectory. In the immediate aftermath, Harry was forced to navigate a complex web of emotions, decisions, and public expectations, all while grappling with the scrutiny of a global audience eager to dissect every move he made. In the first hours following the announcement, Harry was reported to have retreated into a private sanctuary within Frogmore Cottage, a place that had become a refuge for him and Meghan over the years. Friends and aides described him as introspective, pacing the rooms, pausing at windows to stare at the sprawling gardens that had once symbolized stability and family continuity. The prince, sources noted, was quiet but visibly unsettled. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him, as the title he had held since birth, one that had defined his identity and status within the royal hierarchy, was effectively revoked, reducing him to a private citizen in the eyes of the law and the public. This moment forced Harry to confront a profound question. Who was he without the title of prince? For decades, Harry had been known to the world as a royal figure, his life defined by ceremonial duties, public appearances, and the expectations of monarchy. Suddenly, all of that was gone. For many, losing a title might simply mean a change in formal address, but for Harry, it carried the weight of emotional and social displacement. The prince's advisors noted that this was not just a loss of public recognition. It was a fundamental recalibration of his personal identity and family relationships. In the days following the announcement, Harry's immediate focus shifted to understanding the practical consequences of his new status. This included security arrangements, financial considerations, and public engagements. The change in title affected his access to certain funds allocated for royal duties, ceremonial appearances, and travel. Harry had to work closely with legal and financial advisors to ensure that he could maintain a level of independence while safeguarding his family's security and future. These discussions were delicate, balancing the need for privacy with the reality of his continued public visibility. Public reaction to Harry's demotion was instantaneous and intense. Social media erupted with commentary, debates, and speculation about what this meant for the monarchy, for Meghan Markle, and for the couple's children. Global headlines questioned how Harry would redefine his role in public life, whether he would continue philanthropic work, and how he would manage the transition from high-profile royal to private citizen. The intensity of this scrutiny placed additional pressure on Harry, demanding rapid emotional and strategic adaptation. Amid this whirlwind, Harry turned inward, reflecting on his priorities and the legacy he wished to leave. Friends described him as unusually contemplative, spending long hours considering what truly mattered to him: family, personal purpose, and the causes he had championed for years. The decision by King Charles, while shocking, seemed to ignite in Harry a desire to assert agency over his own path. He began sketching out plans for initiatives that could operate independently of royal frameworks, exploring avenues for philanthropy, mental health advocacy, and veteran support. Sources emphasized that Harry was determined not to let the loss of a title define the trajectory of his life. Rather, he sought to transform it into an opportunity for autonomy and meaningful impact. Harry's relationship with Meghan became even more central in these moments of transition. The couple reportedly held lengthy private discussions, weighing options for career endeavors, public engagement, and family life. Meghan's counsel was instrumental, guiding Harry in balancing emotional response with strategic planning. Their discussions also involved considerations about how to handle media narratives, public appearances, and potential interviews. Meghan's experience navigating scrutiny and controversy provided Harry with insight into managing perception while protecting personal well-being. A critical element of Harry's next steps involved recalibrating his role in the public eye. He needed to maintain relevance and influence while no longer benefiting from the automatic authority and prestige that came with his princely title. Advisors encouraged a measured approach, suggesting public engagement in areas aligned with his passions and credibility, such as mental health, veterans' welfare, and international philanthropy. The goal was to allow Harry to redefine his public persona organically, emphasizing impact over ceremonial recognition. Harry also had to navigate the emotional terrain of family dynamics. The decision by King Charles signaled a reassertion of monarchical authority, and Harry's relationship with his father, as well as with Prince William, would inevitably be affected. Sources close to the family described a period of tension and negotiation, with Harry seeking dialogue and reconciliation while simultaneously asserting his independence. The challenge was immense, maintaining family ties without compromising personal integrity or public principles. Another layer of complexity arose from the global media's relentless coverage. Journalists, commentators, and social media analysts scrutinized Harry's every move, dissecting interviews, social media posts, and charitable initiatives for signs of emotional reaction or strategic intent. Harry and Meghan's communications team worked tirelessly to manage these narratives, ensuring that public statements were authentic yet carefully calibrated. The couple's focus was on presenting a composed, purposeful image, reinforcing their commitment to personal causes and familial stability. In parallel, Harry began considering potential new avenues for financial independence. Without the privileges attached to his royal title, he needed sustainable sources of income to support his family and philanthropic ambitions. Discussions with business advisors explored publishing opportunities, speaking engagements, media collaborations, and partnerships aligned with his values. The emphasis was on building a portfolio that reflected his principles and provided autonomy, while respecting public sensitivities regarding former royals engaging in commercial ventures. Socially, Harry's network underwent subtle yet significant adjustments. Friends, colleagues, and supporters offered counsel, encouragement, and strategic guidance. Some relationships deepened, forged in shared experiences of navigating high-pressure public scrutiny. Others were reassessed, as Harry evaluated which alliances were constructive and which were potentially detrimental to his reputation or emotional well-being. This period of social recalibration highlighted the intersection of personal relationships with public perception, illustrating the intricate balance Harry needed to maintain. A notable aspect of Harry's path forward involved mental and emotional health. Sources close to the couple emphasized that the demotion was not just an administrative action, but a deeply personal event with psychological impact. Harry engaged with trusted counselors and mental health professionals to process feelings of loss, disappointment, and frustration. Mindfulness, reflection, and structured dialogue became essential tools, allowing him to channel emotional intensity into purposeful action rather than public conflict. As Harry mapped his next steps, a recurring theme emerged: autonomy. Losing the title, while profoundly significant, offered a chance to define his own identity, free from the strictures and expectations of royal protocol. Whether through philanthropic projects, public advocacy, or media engagement, Harry sought avenues where his voice could carry influence without the constraints of inherited privilege. Advisors noted that this focus on independent impact became a central motivator, shaping decisions and guiding the couple's long-term strategy. Harry also had to confront the reality of public speculation regarding his children, Archie and Lilibet. Media outlets questioned whether their status would change, how titles would be applied in future contexts, and what security arrangements would be maintained. While these matters were sensitive, Harry prioritized clarity and protection for his family, ensuring that decisions regarding his children remained insulated from public controversy while adhering to personal values. In the weeks following the announcement, Harry began carefully curating his public engagements. Each appearance, statement, and initiative was analyzed for alignment with his overarching objectives, demonstrating purpose, protecting family, and asserting independence. Interviews were meticulously planned, charitable appearances selected for strategic impact, and public statements crafted to balance emotional authenticity with measured narrative control. This period highlighted Harry's evolving ability to navigate complex public and private pressures simultaneously. Internationally, reactions to Harry's title revocation and subsequent steps were varied. Supporters praised his resilience, framing him as a figure of principled independence confronting institutional rigidity. Critics questioned his approach, speculating on motivations and long-term consequences for the monarchy. Harry, sources indicated, was aware of these divergent perspectives and consciously chose to focus on actions over words, allowing his initiatives and advocacy to communicate his priorities more effectively than reactive statements could. Ultimately, Harry's path forward became a narrative of adaptation, resilience, and strategic autonomy. Stripped of his title, He faced not just the loss of formal recognition, but the challenge of reasserting identity, influence, and purpose. Through careful planning, emotional support, and deliberate public engagement, he began redefining what it meant to be a royal in exile, an individual leveraging experience, platform, and personal conviction to chart a meaningful course in an altered world.